Last reminder, for those who intend to participate in Korbon Pesach, at least in the eating of the Korbon Pesach, you have to immerse in the mikveh at least the day before Pesach. And if you wish to be in attendance in the temple courtyard for the offering of the Korbon Pesach, you have to go to mikveh even the day before, that is before sunset. Anybody who immerses the day before, let's say the 13th, before sunset, which would be Sunday afternoon, he won't be a Tavul Yom when it comes time to offer the Korbon Pesach. So assuming Tuma, Dechuya, B'tzibur, and the majority are still Tmeim at that point, then he could be in attendance. But if he only goes to mikveh anytime after sunset on the between the 13th and the 14th, and all day on the 14th, he will only become fit to participate in Pesach-like activities at Seder Kochavim. So very important. So make sure you go to mikveh bright and early Sunday afternoon. That's what I intend to go. But no biggie if I miss it, we could go sometime afterward. Let's see, here's Hilchos Korbon Pesach. We're going to go into the parak over here, which discusses the Derech Rechoka. We have here the idea of Derech Rechoka. We're talking about someone who is far away, okay, on a long path. The parak begins with over here, Misha Tamei Bishat Shchita Pesach. Someone who is impure, ritually impure. I heard someone translate spiritually impure. Inside here, wrong thoughts. Ritually impure is something that happens to the body, but it's not something that's physically detectable. So it's a ritual impurity. Okay, let's be very exact in our language here. The person was physically impure, ritually impure. Judge Kitana Pesach, when it came time to slaughter the Korbon Pesach, this is a key word over here. The Rambam's yardstick is at the time when it is supposed to be slaughtered. Shein Shochatin Alav. So they can't slaughter on his behalf. Okay, or he is on a long ways from the temple. Some other unforeseen circumstance, or actually it would be beyond his control, could be foreseen, but it's beyond his control. Shagag, he's unwitting for whatever reason. He didn't offer the first Korbon Pesach. So he's going to participate in what's called Pesach Sheni, which is on the 14th day of the second month in the afternoon. Okay, so that's a mitzvah to say. Over here, the Rambam is going to bring us the definition of what Derech Rechoka is. Here he says, Ezohi Derech Rechoka. What is this long ways? Chamishasar mil hutz rekomat Yerushalayim. It means 15 mil, let's say Roman miles, whatever it is, like we discussed last week, outside of Jerusalem. And in this case, it's the walls of Jerusalem. Even up until the Rambam's time, it was assumed that if you have a city like Jerusalem, it's defined by its walls, because major cities, of course, had a wall. It was a necessary piece of security. And Jerusalem was usually defined by its walls, although nowadays we don't usually have walls around our cities. Our cities are much bigger than they were throughout most of history. It would be impractical to build walls around them for many reasons. Okay, so here's what he's talking about. And as we said before, like you could see over here on this chart, it's actually kind of an argument. How far is this? What did I just do? How far is this meal? What does it entail? So that's a tricky one, because as we've seen, if you were to measure this like the Mishnah says that this is the distance between Jerusalem and Modi'in. The problem is, if we would say that a meal is 15 is a kilometer, about a kilometer, like we saw according to most deos, even according to the Chazon Ish, it's about 150 meters more than a kilometer, which is still much less than a mile. This does not work, even according to the Chazon Ish's most machmir measurement of a meal. It does not make up for where the Modi'in area is. So that already we saw is a little bit of an issue. Beyond that, the Rambam says that if he has between him and Jerusalem on the morning of the 14th with Aliyat HaShemesh, why does the Rambam mention this? Well, first of all, he's talking about the beginning of the day. Normally he says Alot HaShachar. Alot HaShachar is not Aliyat HaShemesh. Why? Normally, when it comes to anything that has to do with the day, la halacha, we usually have Amud HaShachar or Alot HaShachar, which is dawn. When is that? That's a significant time before sunrise. That's when the the darkness of the night starts to fade, or when the light of the day begins to shine. For our intents and purposes, because Rambam says it takes about 24 minutes to walk a mile or so, and the way it works out is a person could walk about three of these meal, okay, three or four of these before dawn, before sunrise, comes out to be about 96 minutes. According to this opinion in the Gra, it's actually just 72 minutes before sunrise, somewhere between this. By the way, in the olden days, it wasn't an exact calculating alos and Amud Shachar wasn't the thing that was very easy to calculate or to know. But in this case, the Rambam saying Aliyat Shemesh. Aliyat Shemesh is sunrise. And this is important because for this particular calculation, the Rambam is only using the time that can be looked at on a clock. What do you mean? I can look at a clock all the time. No, in up until the modern era, times on a clock defined by hours and minutes even were only something that a person could see when the sun was shining using a sundial or what they call a solar clock. Okay, there's no such concept really in halacha of calculating particular hours between sunset and sunrise. Instead, we use much more general terms, much larger divisions of time called the ashmorot, thirds, the watches as they had it, because those on guard duty would switch twice during the middle of the night. So basically, divide night into thirds into three ashmorot. So that's why the Rambam here is saying Aliyat Shemesh. There's a very strict calculation that actually works out over here. So you have to walk 15 mil, and a person has 6 hours. Why do I get those 6 hours? Chamishasar milo yoter. We're talking about he's 15 mil or more. Harezo b'derech Rechoka. Okay, it'll take him from sunrise to until basically the time to offer Korbon Pesach, which is 12 hours later, 6 hours later, half the, it's in the afternoon, because that's Zman HaShchita, as he pointed out. If he's 15 mil or farther away, that's considered Derech Rechoka. Haya beino ve'ena pachot mizeh. But if he's within that radius, eino b'derech Rechoka. That's not considered far away. Why? If he is within 15 mil of Jerusalem when the sun rises, he will be able to get to Jerusalem after Chatzot if he walks at a gentle pace, at an easy pace. And we saw here the way the Rambam has it is he's basically walking at 1.5 miles per hour, which is quite slow. Either way, if a person were to, let's say, leave Modi'in right at sunrise and start walking toward Jerusalem on the main roads, would he get to Jerusalem? How long would it take him? So we have to see. Either way, this is what the Rambam says. Now, where are the main points? We saw that the Rambam is talking about from sunrise until the time when it's ready to offer the Korbon Pesach. And for those who've studied the Gemara here, they're aware that actually Rashi has a totally different way of understanding this Gemara, how he defines what Derech Rechoka is. I have here the notes from Korbon, but also brought a text here from the Yerushalmi that I'm going to read. And we have to ask, in this case, it seems that the Rambam does not hold like the Yerushalmi. He holds more like the way he understands the Bavli. And Rashi apparently was more aware of the Yerushalmi and basically follows that. I'll read this over here. According to Rashi, Pesachim, the intention of the Gemara here is that he is, I guess, 15 mil from Jerusalem at Chatzot. When it becomes the time to offer the Korbon Pesach, halfway through the day, if he's within 15 mil and he walks at a nice pace, he will be able to get there before sundown. Okay, understand that? Okay, so he basically, if he were to start walking, if he would be farther out than this, he would only get there after sundown, and sundown is the last time to offer Korbon Pesach. Okay, so I guess the way Rashi has it is he'll be able to get there in time for Yom Tov to start. A person's not supposed to be traveling on Yom Tov. Yom Tov basically comes in with sunset. That's the last possible time. He has to make sure to get there because if he can't get into the city, he's stuck outside. and basically shouldn't be traveling. And what will happen to him? Remember, there's still this idea of tchum, not tchum Shabbos, but there's a tchum Yom Tov on Yontif. Call the Chomer. If it's on Shabbos, then it's even more problematic. But he has to get there for the eating. He doesn't have to be attending in the temple. By the way, this makes sense. The way Rashi has it, he not everybody has to go to the temple in order to participate in Korban Pesach. You just have to be able to eat it. All it takes is one representative. So that's how he has it. Uh, but either way, the way Rashi has it, it's a 15 meal walk in 6 hours. The Rambam's 6 hours are the first 6 hours of the day from sunrise until it's time to begin offering Korban Pesach. And for Rashi, it's a 15 meal walk from the time when it's beginning of offering Korban Pesach until the end of offering Korban Pesach, which is also 6 hours. Yes, it's true. Someone pointed out that in practice, the earliest time for offering Korban Pesach was actually half an hour afternoon. Yes, that was a takana of Chazal, but technically speaking, strictly speaking, according to the biblical law, they could offer Korban Pesach anytime afternoon. The fact is that they would wait half an hour to make sure it's certainly noon. Don't forget they're using a sundial. So yes, the if basic building of any sundial, if you're a Boy Scout, you know this, is wherever you are on Earth, assuming you can see the sun, your what's the word? I keep forgetting to pronounce it. Josh should tell me how to pronounce it. It says spelled with a G and an O. So even in my current condition, I definitely can't pronounce it. Either way, that is supposed to be casting its shadow, along a certain line every single day. The sun, wherever you are, at is always along the same axis in the sky. The only difference is, depending on what time of the year, how high in the sky it is. But let's say right now I'm looking at the sun at noon, it would be directly ahead of me. And in the winter, it'll be low. It'll be directly ahead of me and low. But in the summer, it'll be much higher. That's the only difference. So there, the Chazal said that if you want to know if it's early enough to bring the Korban Tamid or the Korban Pesach, afternoon, wait half an hour or so that you could actually notice that the shadow has now moved a little bit toward the other side. Okay, that's good. I'm going to read you over here what the Yerushalmi says. Okay, I wrote down. I guess we should put this in Yerushalmi here. There are others who agree with Rashi, by the way, that brings Rabbeinu Chananel, the Tosfos, the Ramban, and the Chafetz Chaim even said that the halacha should follow Rashi. And once again, like any other question of halacha, perhaps a future Sanhedrin will decide such a matter. Is it like Rambam says, the standard is the first half of the day or the second half of the day? Either way, it's also very critical that they tell us about this thing. What were Chazal talking about? 15 meal. Did they mean 15 kilometers or so, or did they mean 15 miles, like Rav Elitzur would say? It says here, in Pesachim, in the Yerushalmi, Kedei sheyavo v'yochal. That's already. You have to give enough time to walk or to arrive and eat. That is, the standard for Derech Rechoka is enough time to make it to be able to eat the Korban Pesach. Okay. Clarana Amar Kedei sheyavo v'yizrok. There's another opinion that says no, it's enough time that he should be able to make it to Korban Pesach and be able to throw the blood. Of course, being able to throw the blood, technically speaking, the blood of the Korban Pesach can be applied to the altar once again anytime before sunset. He has to have enough chance to get there before sunset. Vehu sheyehe betoch alpayim latchum ad shelo chashecha. And also, he has to make sure he's within 2,000 amoth of the tchum before chashecha. And once again, as we saw many times, chashecha means sunset. Okay? He has to make sure he gets within the tchum also by sunset. And then it says there's another thing. Hayanatun mina moda'it vilifnim kodem l'sheshot. Let's say he was within the moda'it, which is another word for modi'in. So he's within the radius before the hour mark of the day. In the morning, he is in this radius of those who are considered close enough to Jerusalem. V'yatzah kodem l'sheshot. And also that same morning, he somehow made himself farther from Jerusalem. He left the radius. I heard about people leaving Jerusalem on Erev Pesach. Well, I told them at least try to get out of Jerusalem on Erev Pesach then. Try to get far away while it's still halachic morning time. Why? Because you run into a real problem according to these uh, major opinions that if you're around within the radius when Korban Pesach is supposed to be offered, and you neglect to do so, you make a chance, God willing, we will succeed at offering Korban Pesach. But all those Jews who didn't make an attempt and they were close enough and they could have gone to mikveh and purify themselves and they did not, they're going to get themselves in a lot of trouble. They'll be looking kares, they'll be looking at kares, unfortunately, because they didn't even try. And then, by the way, that's what Rambam says. That's a mevatel. If they're shogegim, okay, so they can't get kares for such a thing. I would want to defend most of Am Yisrael who are unaware of this. I guess you consider them shogegim. That's a good defense. But those who are in the know should know this. They need to, if they're within the radius of Jerusalem, not purifying themselves, they don't make an attempt to offer Korban Pesach, and everybody else is offering Korban Pesach, then they could be in a lot of trouble. So what happens to this fellow who left? Okay, what does it say? Yachol Yehei Chayav. So he should be held liable for missing Korban Pesach. He was in the radius of Jerusalem, then he left the radius while still mourning. Okay, Talmud Lamar, Nichadal La'asot. The pasuk says he neglected to make the Korban Pesach. Hechadel bishat asiyah chayav. It's a person who neglected to do the Korban Pesach at the time the Korban Pesach is supposed to be done, which is the afternoon. So if he gets himself out of the radius before it's time to offer Korban Pesach, he is not chayav. Why? He's Derech Rechoka. He's beyond the radius. But if he was within the radius, oh, now watch out. Shalo bishat asiyah patur. If he's not around in the radius when it's time for Korban Pesach, he's patur. Basically, any Yidden around the world who are in Derech Rechoka, so they have an exemption. Patur, but it just means they're pushed off to, what do you call it? They're pushed off the Korban Pesach. But hold on one second. If they're Derech Rechoka, Pesach Rishon, right? They have a patur. They have a patur waiting for them. But what if they don't bring Pesach Sheni? What's going to happen if they don't bring Pesach Sheni? That could be a big problem. Okay, if they miss Pesach Sheni, the Mazid, so that's actually a big machlokes. The Rishonim, we didn't see this earlier. I made a chart. Makbili has a good chart based on the opinion of the Rambam, but he doesn't take into the more machmir opinions and the more lenient opinions. The Ravid is much more makel, and Rashi is a lot more machmir regarding these cases. We have here, for example, that they lump a person who shogego nanas in the first Korban Pesach. He didn't offer it. Where's the tamei rechoka that's just type of ones? But then the question is, what if he misses Pesach Sheni? Okay, so if he's still a tamei or rechok for Pesach Sheni, so the answer is a tamei rechok actually can be categorized as shogeg anus or mezid. Okay, I wrote myself a note here for you guys. Hold on one second. Yeah, there's a question. What about up north? Yeah, Zmanim don't exist in the Arctic Circle. Okay, there are some places. The Villagone points out, you go far enough north, even if you're not in the Arctic Circle, there's not enough time between sunset and sunrise to allow for Tzedek Kochavim. Yeah, that's kind of crazy, right? That means the Torah was not meant to be observed even outside the land of Israel. It's Bekoshi we have Torah in the land of Egypt and in Bavel. Kal v'chomer, the farther you get, the less in line Torah is. So how does this happen? If you go north and south, you have this crazy Zmanim thing. You don't know what time to say Kriya Shema. You don't know what time to daven, even if you are basically the same longitude as Israel. Let's say you're right in the same time zone. So you know what time the korbanos are being offered, but it's kind of weird because you look outside, it's not, or it doesn't look like it's supposed to look. So that's a problem. And if you go too far to the east or to the west from the land of Israel, you're also off. Why? Because you're observing the Sabbath when they're not observing it in Israel. You're taking it way too early or way too late, and same thing with Yontif. The Torah was meant to be observed basically in Eretz Yisrael and around Eretz Yisrael. And the fact that these contradictions arise just shows you that you shouldn't be there to begin with. Okay. By the way, we'll prepare this for tomorrow, but let's get back to the point over here. It's kind of tricky, and it's a major machlokas. What is supposed to be done about a person who misses Korban Pesach? Maybe we'll discuss it next Thursday. I think we should do that. Yeah, we'll do that. So you see here that there was a person who was within the perimeter before noon, and then went beyond the perimeter before noon, and he's exempt from kares because he left before the time to that was to do the Korban Pesach. So this Yerushalmi basically goes with Rashi against the way the Rambam has. That's the point. So it's kind of difficult. What led the Rambam to believe what he believed? Okay, good question. So here we have it. The Rambam's probably not like the Yerushalmi. Okay. Also over here, next halacha, highly disputed. Halach v'lo higia. He went, tried to get to Jerusalem. He didn't arrive. What happened to this fellow? The roads going up to Jerusalem, remember there's 4 modern highways, have a lot of people, all the pilgrims streaming there, and everybody's bringing their animals. Why? There's lots of goats, lots of sheep, and also, thank God, a lot of other korbanos coming up. There's a Shami, there's Chagiga, Rabbi Asar, the 14th day is Chagiga, so there's more meat to eat at the Seder. He was in Jerusalem, and he had a problem with his feet. He can't make it to the Azara until the time for the Korban is over. That's considered an anus, beyond his control. He's forced into the situation. He's not considered a Derech Rechoka. There's a big nafkamina. He's not a Derech Rechoka. He's a different type of anus. So what would be the nafkamina? It's a different type of circumstance that kept him from doing it. It says here, Nechshav lanus v'lachen yidachel Pesach sheni. He's pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. If he then doesn't do Pesach Sheni, he was in this category over here. If he doesn't do Pesach Sheni, so he's going to be hit with kares if he doesn't do Pesach Sheni on purpose. So the implication is that if he missed it because of Derech Rechoka, but somehow was mazid the second time around, he's still patur. And indeed, that's what Makbili says in the chart. Person who's tamei or Derech Rechoka the first time around, even if he's mazid the second time around, I'm not doing Pesach Sheni, he's still exempt from any punishment. And here Rashi would say, no, he's also chayiv kares. Doesn't matter why he missed it. If he was Derech Rechoka and he's mazid the second time around, he misses his Korban Pesach, so he can get punished. And the Ravid agrees in this case with the Rambam that yes, there's a distinction over here between this form of ones and being Derech Rechoka. This form of ones means he already has a patur, even if he were to willingly miss bringing Pesach Sheni. I'll create another chart. I'll send it out to everybody so they could see it. And that should be quite helpful. Another halacha. This is a big one. This is the chart I have over here. So we'll look into it. We'll read what the Rambam says, and then we'll see the sources. The Rambam basically has an understanding of this Gemara, as the Rechoka points out, that doesn't exactly fit any of the sources that we have explicit in our editions. Here's how it goes. There was a person who was imprisoned. That's what it means here, chavush. He's imprisoned outside of Jerusalem. Why is he imprisoned? I don't know. Maybe he tried to offer Korban Pesach, or maybe he tried to warn his neighbors that there was going to be a pogrom, because that's the type of thing you have now. Somehow they promised to let him out as night came. They're going to let him out for Yontif. Oh, Baruch Hashem. Who's they? I guess his jailers. Shochatinalav. So the other members of his group can slaughter the Korban Pesach on his behalf. And when he gets out of prison in the evening, he can eat. Assume he went to mikveh, by the way. He has to somehow, the jailers also have to allow him to immerse in the mikveh before sundown, at least. Okay, so I hope they let him out before sundown. But when does this rule apply? B'shaya chavush b'yad Yisrael, when he's imprisoned by Jews. Okay, so that's a good question. The Jews, why? What does it matter if it's Jews or not? With regards to the Gentiles, we can't slaughter the Korban Pesach on his behalf until they actually let him out. We don't trust them. Their promise is worth nothing. If Jews promise to let him out before Pesach, so you could trust it. And I'm wondering if this halacha would apply nowadays. There's so many Asirei Tzion who are sitting in jail. We know about Ariel Danino and his friends, and Amram ben Uliel, who are sitting in prison for no crime of their own. And even if they would promise to let them out before Pesach, would we be able to trust them? I don't know if this halacha should necessarily apply. Unfortunately, it's like we saw the other halacha, that Jews are not chashudim of mishkav zachar. You can assume that Jews are not homosexuals. And unfortunately, nowadays, we suffer from many types of Jews who are like that. There's, I think, the worst one that what's his guy, that professor Yuval Noah Harari is. I don't think this is a coincidence. Also, a very proud practicer of Mishkav Zachar. There's a connection. Once a person gets involved in certain types of evil, it's very easy for him to get involved in more types of evil. By the way, that's again another historical example, like I mentioned before with the animal farm. That's what happened to the Maccabees. The Maccabees fought against Yevonim and Misyavnim, but a few generations later, they basically all became a bunch of Misyavnim. That's not what they called them. They called them Sadducees back then. But that was, in practice, it was the same. They became assimilated, and they were Greek speakers, and they associated more with Gentiles and enemies of the Jews than the Jews themselves. So there's nothing new under the sun. History repeats itself. V'im shachatu alav, this person who had been jailed, let's say they slaughtered on his behalf anyways when they shouldn't have. V'yatzah harizol chel, but he still gets out of jail for some rare reason. Miracle happened. He should still eat the Korban Pesach. V'im lo yatzah. And if he doesn't get out of jail, but they slaughter on his behalf, but so Pesach Sheni, he's exempt from having to perform the second Passover, because after all, the first one was slaughtered on his behalf. Even if he didn't get to eat it, the blood was thrown on the altar. It was accepted with favor by God. So he's okay. He's good to go. Now, the problem is, this doesn't exactly fit what we have here. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to just put our sources, my own chart over here for everybody to see. Share screen. Hold on a second, please. Everybody see this? This is color coded. Okay, color coded to differentiate between the one statement, the statement that's more lenient, and the statement that is less lenient. Okay, the blue statement and the red statement. Here we have the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Ha'onein u'amefakach bagal." These types of people, there's a onain. Let's see, it's not exactly, there's actually distinctions among onain. Onain is a new mourner. That is, he's bereaved, but he's not sitting shivik yet. Why? Because his deceased relative has yet to be buried. So this is the person in the state before the burial. Or a person who's mifakach bagal is one who's doing a search and rescue mission. There's a building has collapsed, or there's been some other landslide, whatever it is. They think there might be survivors underneath the rubble. So there are people going through there. They're standing over, basically, they don't know what they're standing on. They might very well be walking right over corpses, and in which case they've contaminated themselves, but it's a suffix. They don't know. Or a person they promised to let him out of prison. He's been paroled, but they just haven't let him out yet. Or the sick person, or the person who's too elderly, they're not even capable of eating an olive-size amount of the Korban Pesach. And here's the thing: Ein shochatin alehem or shochatin alehem. The word ein, depending on which version of the Mishnah you have, is not there. Okay, some has it, some have it, some don't, and that makes a big difference. So, are these people to be included in the groups or not? If you say you shouldn't include them in the groups, so you understand this is a chumrah in the Mishnah. All these people are iffy, so don't count them. Don't slaughter the Pesach on their behalf. Or you could say that the word ein isn't here. It's a leniency. Okay, slaughter the Korban Pesach on their behalf. There's a chance they could eat it. So that's why this is the tricky word. Okay, that this is the girsa of the Mishnah itself. In all these types, we cannot give them their own Korban Pesach. Okay, because that would make it pasul. The fact that the statement is over here says that you can't slaughter on them on their own means that this word ein shouldn't be here. Otherwise, it doesn't make much sense. It means if you read these two lines together, just straight in the Mishnah, this first statement of the Mishnah is saying that these people can be included in a group, but they can't have their own personal Korban Pesach. Is that possible? Yes. It's a really small lamb. This guy intends to eat a lot. He is a one-man Pesach Chavura. Fine. And why do they not want this one person? Because if a regular person himself shouldn't have his own Korban Pesach, can he eat the whole thing? Yeah, maybe he could. But if it's one of these questionable people, and he's the one eating his Korban Pesach, and he doesn't end up eating it, that means there's no one to eat the Korban Pesach. It's going to go to waste. And then it's going to have to be burned. The leftover meat's going to be burned. That's bringing it to lidei psul. So you can understand why most who have the girsa of this Mishnah don't want this word ein over here. They don't want that. 1 second, please. Is that clear? Yeah, okay, good. Hold on 1 second. Just making a check over here. Here's the Gersa of the Yerushalmi, the way it is. At least the Machon Mamre and other versions I have, which I hope are considered good, especially considering all the usual problems with the printings and all that. It says here, I just ruined something there. No, okay. Instead of lechol. Okay, it says luchal. That's a more of your Yerushalmi way of saying it, like lomar. Shochatina lehem. The word ain isn't there. Val kulan ain shochatina lehem v'fneatzon shelo yaviu v'bidu lidei psul. Okay, the way we just explained the Mishnah. This is Talmud. Rabbi Yosei be Rabbi Boon. Abba Barchana b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. This is Rabbi Yossi said. Rabbi Yossi said that Rabbi Boon said it. That Rabbi Barchana said that Rabbi Yochanan said. Matnitha b'shuhu Yisrael. This Mishnah is referring to when its Jews have imprisoned him. Okay, they've promised to let him go, so the Jews will keep their promise. While im chavashuhu goyim, if he's imprisoned by goyim, non-Jews, even though they've promised to let him go, asher pihem diber shav yiminam minin shakir. It's actually twice in this Tehillim over here. Their mouths speak false or vain things, and their right hand is a false right hand. Okay, you can't trust them to let him go. Benatun chutz Yerushalayim. It's talking about, by the way, he's imprisoned outside Jerusalem, like the Rambam threw into the halacha. If he's imprisoned in Jerusalem, we assume they're going to let him out. Okay, fine. So this modification, this statement over here, that he's imprisoned by Jews, is talking about the Mishnah itself, saying it modifies the Mishnah. Yeah, the Mishnah's rule allows for relying on this fellow being freed before Pesach with a guarantee because it is Jews who are imprisoning him. But in a case that's not mentioned in the Mishnah, if it's Gentiles, the Mishnah's rule doesn't apply. We should not be including this fellow in the group. Or as I wrote here in English, even though he's currently in prison, because his Jewish jailers have promised to release him, he can participate in Korban Pesach. And the exception is not if he's alone and not if he's held by Gentiles. That's this Yerushalmi. Is that exactly what the Rambam said? Or we're going to see, no, not exactly like the Rambam said. Here's the Girsa of the Bavli, which is also according to Perish Rashi. It says here, Hamafakach etagal instead of bagal. We also don't have the onin over here. Once again, general statement. We allow these people to be part of the Korban Pesach. Why? Part of the group, because for whatever reason, they've promised to let him go. Al kulam ein shochatin aleim b'fnei atzman shem yaviu et Pesach lidei psul. You know that line? Good. Amar Rabba bar Huna. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Oh, this is the same attribution over here. This is Rabba bar Chana over here, and this is Rabba bar Huna. Okay, Abba bar Chana, sorry, but they're both saying this in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. But the problem is, it's not exactly what we have in Yerushalmi. Lo shanu ella. Okay, and Rashi over there says, "Dein shochatino al chavush b'fnei atzmo beidar surim da'akum." This last line over here, al kulam ein shochatin b'fnei atzman, he cannot make a one-man group if they've promised to let him go. Why? Because he is imprisoned by akum. Of course, it should be goyim. That's a censored text. Val beidar surim Yisrael shochatina filu. Rashi adds that word. B'fnei atzmo keven daf techinu mapikle. Because they've promised him, they will do it, as it says in this pasuk. So over here, the way Rashi understands, and the way Rashi explains the Bavli to us, it's entirely different. There's a general rule that a person who's been promised to let out. If he's been promised to be let out of jail, so we can include him, even if it's Gentiles there. The only question is, what if he wants to make his own group? If he wants to make his own group, he has to be imprisoned by Jews. Or as I wrote here in English, even though he's currently in prison, because Jewish jailers have promised to release him, he could participate in Korban Pesach, even if he is alone. But if he's held by Gentiles, he could be counted to join a group of others even. So you see the radically different approaches to this Mishnah that we could find in the Bavli. Hold on 1 second. Now I see that I did change this around a little bit here. Hold on 1 second. There we go. See, that should make it better. Okay. So where we have this statement over here, Yerushalmi is more machmir than Bavli. According to the Yerushalmi, if he is imprisoned by Goyim, he has no chance of getting out. But according to the Bavli, if he's imprisoned by Jews, we even have a bigger kula that we can let this guy arrange his own Korbon Pesach for himself while he's still in jail. Here's what the Rambam said. Look what the Rambam said. Let's go back to the Rambam. This is the text we had in the Rambam. He says, all these types of people, we cannot include them. See, the Rambam had it, ain. So that's weird because we saw the actual text of the Mishnah most don't have this ain here. It's not in the Yerushalmi. It's not in the Bavli. So that's not how it was explained. But here the Rambam says, we do not slaughter for these people. We can't include any of them. Okay? So this is what, by the way, you could find in the Rambam's, like I said, the Girsa of the Mishnah of the Rambam. So how does the Rambam work this line over here, this word, ain? What does this last statement of the Mishnah mean? Okay. So the Rambam in this parish, this over here is the parish of the Rambam, at least one of the translations, the parish of the Rambam to this Mishnah. He says here, okay, this condition that we don't slaughter on his behalf is because he's imprisoned by Gentiles. Even though it says he has a promise they're going to let him out of jail, we don't trust them. So we can't include this fellow in the Korbon Pesach. If he has a promise from Jewish jailers, so they will let him go. Okay? And when the Rambam says this explanation over here, he is not talking whatsoever about this extra line. What about making his own group? The Rambam is just over here saying, well, do we slaughter on his behalf or not? Well, it depends. Ain't shochatina lehem. Why? Why is that in the Mishnah? Because he's trapped by Goyim. But if he's being held by Jews, the Mishnah doesn't apply. So that's why I wrote over here. That means making his own group. Ela hadim sham ne'amar rakal rotzel lomar ki anu lo nishcho pesach lavarasha onim ocholimo zekinimo fakim esagal. Here, the Rambam also said this. It's like we want to say, okay, this is the way we interpret it. We will not slaughter Korbon Pesach for a group that's entirely composed of these people who are bereaved or sick people or zakanim or these other types. Okay, but he's not talking about the person in prison. See, this extra line over here, I guess, in yeshiva should say it's going on everybody else except for the person who's stuck in prison. And let's go back now to the Rambam, his statement in halacha over here. This is what we have over here, what we saw before. Okay, this is the gears of the Rambam in the Mishnah. This is the Rambam statement for the halacha. He says here, Misha chavush chutz l'chumat Yerushalayim v'ivtichu latzeit l'erev shochatin alav. Okay, like he says here, he has a promise, so he can leave because it's Jews who give him the promise. If he's imprisoned by Gentiles, we have to wait until he actually gets out there. As we saw. So we see, I'm going to read this in Hebrew, I'll translate it. Okay, the girsa and the psaktim fit. See, the Rambam here has this word that other people don't have. The Rambam's halachic conclusion is basically the same as what comes out from Yerushalmi, if you compare the two. Okay, according to the Yerushalmi, once again, Yerushalmi is mekel. He has a promise to get out. Why shochatin alav? The Yerushalmi Mishnah says, why shochatin alav? Shochatin alav. Why? Because he's imprisoned by Jews. But if he's imprisoned by Gentiles, no dice. And the Rambam has it the other way around, reversed in logic, but eventually the same conclusion. Lama ain't shochatin alav, because he's imprisoned by Goyim. But if he's Jews who imprisoned him, he can offer the Korbon Pesach. It's kind of weird. So the question is, what did the Rambam have in front of him? That's a little bit confusing. I'll say it again if anybody needs. Okay. Ela magia l'sham be'ukimta shel bavli. He has the din of the Yerushalmi, but he's using the akimta of the Bavli because the Mishnah medaberet al bir asrim shel goyim. He's basically saying, what does the Rambam say? This statement of the Mishnah, this first statement, whatever it is, shochatin love ain't shochatin love, is established like the Bavli. Yeah, because he's trapped by goyim. Okay? But in the Bavli, it's once again, why can he participate? He's trapped by goyim. Okay, so it's going to lead to even greater kula. That the Rambam would say, no, ain't shochatin love. Why? Because he's trapped by goyim. Okay, very interesting. Okay, and that's why the Rambam doesn't have this din of making his own group or not, because the Mishnah, like the Rambam says over here, is not talking about it. So I'll leave this with the Tzarech. There's a lot to say in the Rishonim, but you could, like I said, use the color code to go through this. Like I said, the conclusion of the Rambam fits the psak that comes out of the Bavli, of the Yerushalmi, that's over here. But he starts off with an opposite gears of the Yerushalmi. Okay? The Yerushalmi is basically saying that this fellow can participate in Korbon Pesach. Why can he participate? It's Jews who have imprisoned him. Goyim are imprisoning him, he cannot participate. Fine. And the Rambam would say, the statement originally is, he cannot participate. Why? Because it's Goyim who have imprisoned him. But if Jews would imprison him, he could participate. Okay? A reversal of the logic and what it says in the Mishnah, but the same conclusion.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.